Okay, so you guys are going to make a section thrown vase. It's going to be at least 12 inches tall when it's completed, and you're going to use at least 2 sections to create it. You can use more sections than that if you need to. You could also add a few coils to it if you can't quite get it to 12 inches. So I'm using 2 3-pound chunks of clay, and that'll be more than enough to give me my 12 inches. Hopefully you can center and throw 3 pounds of clay.
I just want to have a lot of different sections. Just for fun.
So when you center your clay, you want to leave the form a little bit taller like this. You know, if you're making a bowl, then you would flatten it down like this. But if you flatten it down like that, then that makes it that much taller. You have to make it later on. Save yourself some work by leaving it tall when it's in the centered stage before you open.
I made too many faces. I don't even know what the heck that is. I just saw the house. Yeah, whatever.
It would be very frustrating to make a nice 12-inch tall vase and then have a crack on the bottom. So it's important that after you open it, you compress that clay at the base. I'm doing that right now just by taking my fingers, going back and forth, starting at the middle and pressing down. It's going to flatten it out. It's going to make it stronger at the bottom so that hopefully we don't get that crack. Also make sure that you have enough clay at the base. If it's too thin, you make a nice 12-inch tall vase and then you go to cut it off, and there's nothing there, then you're going to have to start over. Alright, so I've got the bottom fixed. Now I'm going to pull the walls up. Make sure you slow the clay down as you're pulling. It's really important that your clay stay steady without a wobble, and that you leave the rim fairly thick so that the next section can attach. If you have a thin rim, then they're not going to attach very well. That's the point I'm going to do for the bottom section. Notice how I'm making sure this rim is really steady. I'm making sure it's fairly thick by pressing down. That's so the next section will have an area to score and slip to. And then finally I'm going to shape it a little bit with this rib. This technique is to help you learn how to throw something large by using smaller amounts of clay. It's really difficult to center and throw 6 pounds of clay, but it's much easier to center and throw 3 pounds. So this is the bottom half of the vase. You can see that it starts narrow and gets wider. The top half is going to start here and then come back. Okay, so this side is for measuring the inside of something. This side is measuring the outside of something. I want to measure the outside of this because I want the outside of both cylinders to meet up. Okay, so the top section is going to be thrown upside down. So that means that when I come to the top of this section, it's going to be the exact same size as that section. Though they don't have to be the same shape, but they do have to be the same size at the top, so that when they're leather hard, I can turn this one upside down and they'll fit right on top of there. Alright, so for the top section, when you open the clay up, you're going to open all the way to the base, all the way to the bat. Because this is going to be the top section of my base. I don't want to have any clay there. So go ahead and open all the way to the bat. As I'm pulling this up, I'm stretching it out to make it wider, so that it'll be the same size as the base section. Again, make sure you keep that rim nice and steady. Make sure it's plenty thick so you can score and slip them together. Just going to check, you can see I need to make it a little wider. So I'll take this rib and stretch it out now. You can see I'm pressing from the inside to make it wider. And just holding that rib to steady it on the outside. Continually check the rim size. It's easy to make it bigger, but it's much more difficult to make it smaller again. So it's close, just a little bit bigger. It's really going to be a lot easier to put together if they're exactly the same size. If they're not close, it's going to be really difficult. Okay, so let's look at the water out. Leave both sections attached to the bat. Don't cut them off until they're leather hard. Leave them attached for now. So I've got both pieces are leather hard. I'm just going to make sure that they line up. If they don't, then I would attempt to trim one. And they should be slightly flexible, but obviously firm enough that you can stand one on top of the other. If they're not this stage, then it's not going to work. So I'm going to start with this top section. I'm going to score and slip it, and then I'm going to cut it off with the bat. Lots of slip. Notice the square marks are pretty deep. And then I'm going to cut this off. Okay, so that one's ready to go. I can set it off to the side first. So that way once I do the bottom one, then I can just set it right on top of there.
Is the bottom of that a 1/4 inch?
The top of this is a 1/4 inch. The bottom down here is probably closer to 1/2 inch. It's a little thicker at the bottom. You can always trim that later.
Team effort.
It's okay, I had help someone for last time.
Probably an angry game.
Lots of
It
slip.
might have been.
I'm willing to bet on it. Pretty good.
Nice.
You waiting to learn?
Let's go. You go.
Okay, so then this top section,
Man, those are some
Reminder-
nice olive green pants.
I have not cut this bottom one off of the bat yet. It's still attached.
This must be some color powder.
Yeah.
Is it stuck?
No, I just cut it, so it's really, yeah, it's really thick. I'm gonna fix that. I'm just gonna set it down lightly so that I can make sure that it's centered on here. You don't want it hanging off one side.
And then you're gonna put the petals in that.
I'm not going to cut it off. Press down lightly. Should see some slip oozing out. That's good. That means I've got a good contact between the two. I'm going to take this blending tool and I'm going to blend the seam together on the outside. I'm going to take my aluminum rib.
Now you're gonna get your pants all wet.
So now I'm going to take the aluminum rib and smooth out.
Oh, I'm gonna like soaks through.
Okay, so the seam's
That is gorgeous.
much better than it was. You can see now the top looks pretty bad. It's really, really thick. Obviously, we don't want it to look like that. So you've got a couple choices. You could take trim tools at this point, and you can trim this to the proper thickness by using some trim tools to trim this up and make it look nice. But I'm not going to use that method. The method I'm going to use is a little bit more difficult, but it's a nicer product, and I'll be able to get it a little taller. I'm actually going to rethrow the top section of this. This is really soft right here. You can see how easy I can squish that. So that means if I get it wet, the sponge, I can actually pull that clay up and finish it off. I'm just getting the clay wet right now. It's really important that you get this seam really well connected down here, because if you start putting this torque on the pot up here, and if it's not really well connected, they'll just pop apart. So you can see I'm able to make it a little bit taller, and then it's easier to shape. Okay, so now this is wide enough. I can fit my hand down inside the pot. So I'm going to reach down in here and I'm going to work the inside of this seam. Just a bunch of slip and a little bit of clay in there, so this is helping smooth it out. The top's just a little bit uneven, and that's pretty common for doing this, so put this straight.
That's what I was thinking.
Two most important things. The first would be making sure that your sections are really symmetrical and not wobbly. Putting these together is really difficult if your sections are wobbly, as you can imagine. The other most important thing is that when you put them together, the sections are the correct amount of dry. If they're too soft, they're going to collapse. If they're too dry, they're not going to stick together, not going to be able to